TV party tonight!
What?
TV party tonight!
Oh, we got nothing better to do than watch TV and have a couple of brews.
Don't want to talk about anything else!
We don't want to know.
We're dedicated, yes.
To our favorite shows!
Oh, my circus!
Everybody loves Hypnotoad.
Scary dog!
Pearson and Blursville.
Futurama!
Good evening. You are listening to a Radulich Broadcasting Premier Podcast TV Party Tonight. I am your host, the mandated reporter, and frankly, I'm mortified, Mr. Mark Radulich. And tonight, our favorite show is Castlevania Season 4, the final season. Brought to you by the good people at Federator Studios, Shankar Animation, Project 51, and Netflix. Castlevania is an American anime-style adult animated streaming television series based on the Japanese video game series of the same name by Konami. But the first two seasons adapt to 1989 entry Castlevania 3, Dracula's Curse, and follow Trevor Belmont, Alucard, and Sypha Belnate as they defend the nation of Wallachia from Dracula and his minions. Characters and elements from the 2005 entry Castlevania Curse of the Darkness are also featured beginning in the second season. The backstory of Alucard's mother, Lisa, is also adapted from Castlevania Symphony of the Night, totaling 3 games used as source material. Joining me to finish off this series, or actually, we finished it off last season because it was so bad we took it out in the backyard and shot it. But to help me dig up its corpse, revive it one last time, ladies and gentlemen, Gravedigger Robert Winfree. How do you do, sir?
I do fine, and you are correct. For those of you who don't know, Mark and I have reviewed every season, including the first, which is not actually a season. It's a teaser more than anything else. But we talked that, we talked Season 2, we talked Season 3. Now we're going to finish this off. And you know what, Mark, I have to say, I'm grateful for this season, because boy, is it just light years better than Season 3.
Yeah, I almost wish, we talked about this with another Netflix series. We talked about this with Jupiter's Legacy, as a matter of fact, where they seem to have a full season of ideas, but then they split them in half, and so part of it doesn't feel like a full season. And that's kind of what happened with Season 3, is that it was a lot of setup for this season, but it never really felt like its own entity. It just felt like a lot of setup.
Yeah, and it's even worse when you, looking back on Season 3, now that 4 is done, it's even worse in retrospect. Because boy, did they not need 10 episodes for that.
No, they really didn't. That was one of the big complaints, was to get to where they got to, everything felt very drawn out. Like honestly, combine this season with last season and keep it to 13 episodes, and I think it would have been fine.
Yeah, that, or you do what you did with Season 1, and Season 3 is just this short, 4-episode interlude.
Mm-hmm.
That's just set up for this season, and I think you could have accomplished the same thing.
All right, so let's get into it. Episode 1. All right, here we go. Murder wakes up. 6 weeks after the Battle of Lindenfeld, Trevor and Sypha are exhausted from continually traveling the land, slaying night creatures and cultists who seek to resurrect Dracula. During these battles, they learn about a Grim Reaper named Death, who eats the souls of the dead. The two arrive at Targovist, where Dracula's campaign against humanity began after the village killed his wife, and are watched by a pair of vampires named Vani and Ratko from the tower. Meanwhile, Alucard encounters a horse with a dead messenger, discovering a map to the village of Dynasty, whose peoples have requested his aid in slaying the vampires and night creatures. After burying the corpse of the messenger, Alucard looks in a mirror and realizes that he's turning into Belmont and feeling the need to meddle in others' affairs. So, right off the bat, I can tell you the thing I liked about this episode was Sypha's sort of breakdown, where she's like, "You've turned me into this." It's yelling at Trevor. It's all we do is fight monsters and go from place to place. I wasn't like this before I met you. I thought that was really amusing.
Sypha and Belmont have some really great interactions.
They do. I really like the Sypha character. She has a very, not narrow, but she has a very specific way she sees the world. And she can be convinced with evidence otherwise, but besides that, she tends to be very, very strong in how she feels and how she deals with things. And I think, this was one of those situations where she stopped kind of being herself for a little while, and then she suddenly realized that was happening, and she's like, no, I'm not, this traveling vagabond going about murdering people. I have purpose. I want to do things. I want to build things. Like Trevor uses that phrase later on in the series. He was like, give the world back to those who want to build things, not just destroy everything, which I really liked as a theme of the season. But yeah, she they have some good antagonism of one another. They have good sexual chemistry for two cartoon characters. And she's probably my favorite character in the whole show.
Yeah, they play off of each other very well. I like the backtracking they do with the timeline, so we can get highlights of what brings them into the kind of conclusive moment.
Mm-hmm.
So we get to see what they're doing, and it's a lot of it's a lot of the grind, man. It's a lot of the grind, and you can see it's kind of wearing on them. And that will get a little bit more prominent later on with Sypha in particular. But we get some really cool action sequences, which is one of the things that Season 3 was by and large missing. The only really good sequence of stuff happening on screen in Season 3 was the basement fight at the end.
Mm-hmm.
And this one, we are kind of right off the bat, it's going to be a lot more action-filled. So thanks for taking the note, guys.
Yeah.
We also get a little bit of Alucard. Alucard burning Trevor when he's not even there is a really great thing. Like, he's just hanging out and I think his line at one point is, "And once again, God shits in my breakfast." Then he stops and goes, "God, I'm turning into Belmont."
Alucard's whole season arc here, I really enjoyed. Last one where he was just with the two kids that turned on him at the end, I didn't especially love. We talked about that. This one, where he finds purpose in taking care of others, and is moving beyond "I'm Dracula's cursed son," I thought was really good. I thought it was a good turn for the character. He's
got a great line in a couple of episodes, about what always seems to cause him problems.
Mm-hmm.
And he says it's never the fighting, it's never the killing, it's the trying to help.
Yeah.
Which, I imagine you empathize with a little bit.
A lot. That's probably why it jumped out at me. Anything else about episode 1?
It's a really nice reintroduction to what's going on. We catch up with everyone. We establish a few things. We establish some seeds for our 3 heroes. It's a solid episode of television.
All right, Having the World, episode 2. As Hector enjoys himself at Carmilla's castle, he sees cracks in the walls and places a magic stone inside. Later that night, while Hector is trying to forge a special hammer, Lenore urges him not to test Camilla's patience, as even she cannot protect him if Carmilla loses her temper. Later, Lenore learns that Carmilla won't be satisfied by anything less than dominion over the entire world, including Dracula's castle. Shortly afterwards, Hector finishes work on the hammer. Elsewhere, while attempting to rest, Trevor and Sypha are ambushed by night creatures on Varney and Ratko's orders, but are saved by Zamfir, the head guard of Targavist's underground court. Zamfir wishes to recruit the pair to the local resistance, provided that she and the underground court earn their trust, as Zamfir pursues Varney and Ratko. Trevor finds a glowing stone in the corpse of a resistance soldier and pockets it in the hopes that it will prove useful. God bless you. So the thing that jumped out about me about this one, Hector has a really funny line about being turned into a slave, and then what's her name, Lenore? It's like, I can turn you into a slave. You're my pet, and it's not malevolent the way she says it. It's very much earnest. He's like, no, you're just my pet. That's all. It's fine. Why wouldn't you want to be my pet? Like she's Elmira from Tiny Toons. Carmilla is Carmilla. She's our most mustachy, twirly villain in the entire show.
I feel like the writers think she's more interesting than she is.
Yeah, she's just like, I want all the power and I want to take over all the places, and it's like, whatever. Hector throughout this entire season kind of cracks me up because he's very he has he in the back of his mind, he has a task. He has a task that he wants to complete, and when he's done that, he's like, "And I'm done now. I'm ready to just die." And so he, in terms of performance, it's not the most dynamic thing I've ever seen. It's a very understated performance, but I think it suits his character and his predicament.
It really does, and it's one of those instances where the correct call for, again, your characterization might lead to them being a little bit, again, kind of, again, like you said, undynamic. His whole thing right now is he is helping remotely to revive Dracula to bring back Dracula from hell, and this makes sense. It's something that he would want to do, given he is guilt-ridden. It also makes sense that he would then view, okay, Isaac is going to find me eventually, at which point with Dracula back, I can let him kill me and all will be, and we'll just call that good. We'll call it a wash, and we'll just see what the next life has in store. And it makes sense for the character. I think you're correct in terms of performance. It's not very... it's a little bit static, but the performance is also exactly what it needs to be, and tends to do enough to remain at least a little bit interesting throughout this.
All right. Anything else?
I think there's anything else for this episode. No, it's the next episode where we catch back up with the lesbians, I think.
Walk Away, Episode 3. The night creatures bury corpses and rebuild the city under the direction of Isaac, who explains the city's past to one of them in an attempt to teach them the value of choice. Later, Varney contacts Isaac through a magic mirror, but ends up antagonizing Isaac and is cut off. At their campsite, Marana and Striga are ambushed with the rest of their vampire kin by humans, who strike their tents at dawn to take advantage of the sunlight and killing them. Marana takes shelter inside a coffin, while Striga and the rest of her armies wear day armor to protect themselves from the sun, killing off all their attackers. Carmilla later contacts her sisters and urges them to come home. Back in Targovist, Trevor and Sypha witness how the remaining people are malnourished and opt to investigate the city, hoping to earn Zamfir's trust by aiding others in her place. Go ahead and take this one. I barely remember this episode.
Sadly, probably the closest we'll ever get to some really good hand-drawn berserk battle animation comes out of this episode, because I forget the names of the nice lesbian vampire couple. But the big one who goes nuts with her giant sword. Again, the closest we're going to get to some quality gut style animation, I think.
Mm-hmm.
I liked there's a bit of a theme with some of the dialogue in this particular season. There's a really good point that they get to, but they either get there soon and then just keep talking, or they take too long to get there. And there's a little bit of that here. It becomes more of a problem in a few later discussions that are had. For this one, what we wind up getting is one of them looking at the situation and going, we won't, even if we conquer this territory, we're never going to actually win. We'll be stuck. The humans will always resist, and we'll be in this position fighting rebellious insurgents for the rest of our lives, and given that we're vampires, that could be a very, very long time. And I don't think any of us want this. And again, our big conqueror goes, yeah, but there's not a battle I can't win. And then after her fight with, again, these humans who have shown up, she kind of comes away from it going, those aren't even soldiers. This wasn't even a real battle in that particular respect. It was just people desperate to not have fought. They would not, their spirits will never break entirely. They're never just going to lay down and die. And if we conquer this big area, we'll never expand, but we will be forever putting down uprisings. And I don't know that I want to do that. That doesn't sound like a very fruitful use of time and energy. And I think it's this episode. It might be one in a little bit. where they kind of look at each other and go, the vampire's desire to control and combined with our brutality and whatnot, it's probably why we always seem to win every battle we fight, but ultimately lose the war. And that's a very kind of sober assessment of what's going wrong with your mentality. And it's, again, a little bit of a appropriate note about, again, that would not be historically untrue. There are in fact, military campaigns that were filled with very, very successful battles for one side, but they ultimately lose the war. Mm-hmm. For a number of reasons. Let's see, what was the other? Sypha yelling at people not to dig their latrine pits that close to the vegetable garden.
Oh yeah, that was the one thing that I remembered from this, where she finally just loses her shit and she's like, "This town there's just no one in charge here. No one is organizing things." And she starts yelling about the latrines and everything, and then she goes and confronts the one person. I loved all that. That was great. And there's just Trevor just kind of hanging back, like letting her do her thing.
Well, look, when your woman's had enough and has to blow up for a minute or two, he knows enough to stay out of that.
Yeah, he's like, "Nope, I'm good, thanks." I thought it was all good stuff, though.
Yeah, like their explorations of Targovishta, and it's a little bit drawn out, but it's not too bad. Mm-hmm. Them trying to figure out what's going on. You've got a little bit of the backdrop here about Varney and Ratko is there. They're kind of our touchstone for the attempted Dracula resurrection for the first few episodes. We're about to get the other part of that in our next episode with what's going on with Saint Germain.
All right, so episode 4. While Trevor and Sypha discuss how to approach the situation in, how'd you pronounce it, Targovishta? Mm-hmm. Alucard arrives at Dynasty and defends it from attacking night creatures. Accepting the village leader Greta's request to act as its protector, Alucard also meets Saint Germain, who recalls the search for his lost love ending up in a corridor between dimensions. He met an alchemist who gave him a key to the corridor so he can find his beloved, provided that he is willing to sacrifice everything he ever had. Saint Germain then recalls how he was contacted 6 weeks prior by Varney while searching for help in his endeavor, the latter wishing for his aid in resurrecting Dracula. Back to the present, Saint Germain suggests the people of Dynasty move into Dracula's castle for protection, to which Alucard reluctantly consents. All right, go ahead.
There's an interesting discussion, not terribly interesting, but decently interesting, between Trevor and Sypha. Like, what are we going to do about this? We have the underground court, we have these people on top, and they're kind of barely existing.
Was this the episode where they're brought to the king and queen who just happen to be dead?
No, that's later.
Okay.
This is them kind of like trying to figure out what direction they're going to take. This is also the point when we start seeing some of the magical items that Trevor's been collecting, which are going to. I really wish we'd done more with. I really do, but they're just kind of like decompressing about what's going on. What's their future going to be? We've been led here by all of our clues and the kind of investigating we've been done. But now that we're here, what exactly are we going to do? Mm-hmm. Alucard shows up at the village in the nick of time, kills a bunch of things because he's a badass. We're introduced to Greta, and she and Alucard have some fun back and forth. Then the big thing from this particular episode is the flashback to Saint Germain and what he's been up to. And because we last saw him after he got into the Infinite Corridor at the end of Season 3. Mm-hmm. And he ran into an alchemist. He said, "Yeah, I know how to..." And gives him the... kind of the rundown about, yeah, you're supposed to be an alchemist. Well, what's the great work for alchemy? The great work for alchemy is to create a rebus, and they say it in a really weird way. The ability to reform all matter, both physical and spiritual. And if you have one of those, you can use it because they saw the Infinite Corridor controlled via enough death magic and a night creature that had a couple of different souls in it that could stabilize what was going on. And this particular alchemist says, yeah, if you want to create a proper rebus, you need souls, both male and female, and you put them together in a body. And it helps if they're powerful enough, and boy, don't you just know a couple of people in hell who might actually work out for this, and okay. And this is kind of the moment wherein he decides, he's been kind of dabbling in alchemy, and he says, at one point he says, I have nothing to sacrifice, and this other alchemist, who we learn is a different character entirely, kind of laughs at him, like, no, there's plenty you can sacrifice. Your morals, your ethics, your sanity, you, sir, have been half pregnant for far too long. Either commit to this or don't. And he comes out away from this going, yeah, all right, sure. So he kills some people. He acquires information. He starts figuring out what he needs to do to bring Dracula back. And one of the keys is he needs to get into Dracula's castle because that's where Dracula died. So in service to this plan, he gets a vampire to round up some night creatures, and he says, drive everyone in this area because we know where Dracula's castle is, but we're not going to go challenge the guy guarding it. That's entirely too much of a hassle. So we drive all the humans from the surrounding villages into the closest village to Dracula's castle. And then we kind of rely on Alucard being a decent person, and we'll all try to take shelter in the castle, and from there I can do my work while you guys attack it from the outside. And all will be well. Which is all things considered, is a really good plan.
Mm-hmm.
This is a fair amount of setup. It's mostly a lot of flashback to Saint-Germain. But it also gives his character a little bit of context. He was just kind of a lovable rogue in Season 3. The charming rogue. In this one, we actually get a little bit of flashback to kind of his world weariness in certain places.
Mm-hmm.
He was just a traveling, scholar, alchemist, magician, whatever he could be to various courts, and life at court can be just the most tedious experience. And we see him a little bit beaten down by the grind, and then he finds someone who he loves, and loses her, and now is desperate to get her back. It's a fairly standard motivation, but it's entirely understandable. So we got him fleshed out a little bit, and now our group of ragtag refugees is heading to Dracula's castle, while our other two heroes are like, okay, something weird is going on in Targovishta, and we have to figure this out. So things continue coming to a head.
All right. Episode 5. Yeah?
Yep.
Back in the world. Alucard, Saint Germain, and Greta escort the villagers out of Dynasty, but are ambushed by night creatures in the forest. Meanwhile, in Carmilla's castle, Hector resurrects the dead into night creatures, and Lenore informs him of Camilla's scheme to dominate the world, confessing that Camilla used her the same way Dracula used Hector. Alucard, Greta, and Saint Germain manage to fend off the night creatures successfully, leading to the villagers into Dracula's castle. Back in Targovishta, Trevor and Cypher continue their investigation, where Cypher is outraged to find Zamfir taking food from the already starved townsfolk to keep her own people nourished. Despite their differences, Cypher saves Zamfir from a night creature, as they cannot afford to lose able fighters. Back in the emptied city, Isaac and the night creatures move to attack Carmilla's castle, planning to kill the remaining vampires there, while Isaac himself confronts Hector. So again, I like the stuff with Cypher and Zamfir. When she notices, like, what are we doing? Where are you storing the food and all of that? I liked all of that. Here, I don't really remember much else about this episode, even after reading it.
We get some nice action sequences as our group is heading back to Dracula's castle.
Mm-hmm.
If you're kind of an animation nerd, and I'm a little bit of one, then there's some fun stuff there, but it is just kind of an action sequence. Also, while Alucard and Greta bond a little bit.
I did notice that, but I guess I was saving it for the finale because that end fight with Death is amazing looking.
Oh, it is. It is just, again, this whole season, if it gets one thing right, it gets more than one thing right, but if there's only one thing, there is gorgeous visuals and action sequences.
Yeah. The camera work and the animation and the fight scenes is really some of the best I've ever seen.
Yeah, it's tremendous. It's absolutely tremendous. So this is the episode where we get that line from Alucard about getting back in the world, and no, again, I never have problems when I just kill things. I never have problems. What gets me in trouble is not the violence. It's always when I try to help someone else. And Greta kind of, again, Alucard and Greta have some nice chemistry.
Mm-hmm.
So they kind of play off of each other, and we get the prolonged action sequences. Trevor and Sypha, trying to figure out what's going on, looking for the underground court, and Sypha just losing patience with the entire setup. What we get is the big stinger when Isaac has finally concocted enough of his night creatures and has rebuilt the city that he was in to his satisfaction, opens the big mirror, and sends his army through, and now it's on.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, this I was very much awakened into, this next part. So, Episode 6, You Don't Deserve My Blood. The Battle of Syria has begun, and Isaac and his army of night creatures have infiltrated Carmilla's castle to kill the vampire kin and Carmilla's own night creatures. Lenore was going to drag Hector out of the castle, only to be trapped by Hector's magic barrier, where no vampires can get in or out. Isaac met Hector again, and just when Isaac was about to kill Lenore, Hector urges him to kill him instead. However, Isaac spared their lives, especially when Hector cut off his own finger to remove the binding ring. Isaac then activated the barrier from the stones placed by Hector earlier to trap Carmilla in her throne room, full of his night creatures who are overwhelming her. Isaac and Carmilla began fighting to the death, and with his night creatures, he got the upper hand and fatally wounded her. But rather than falling to her enemies, she committed suicide by stabbing herself to explode in the throne room. Marana and Stringer arrived too late when they felt that Carmilla is dead, so they and the rest of the vampire kin walked away. Soon after, Hector and Isaac discuss about how they were both used as a tool for leverage. Hector then decides to stay with Lenore, while Isaac moves on to his own life. I really like this episode. I feel like now we're finally starting to tie up the loose strings of this series, and things are starting to come to natural conclusion. So Isaac beats the trio of vampire women. Hector, I thought it was weird that Hector decided to stay with Lenore after everything that happened. I guess you can't help who you love and how you got there, but I thought it was an odd move. Lenore's reaction to being in the cage I thought was hilarious.
It was.
The end sequence where, Carmilla is fighting the wave after wave of vampires and finally just says, fuck it, and stabs herself. I was like, okay, well done. My only complaint about this episode is the last conversation between Isaac and Hector feels like it goes on forever.
Yeah, remember what I said a little bit ago. There's some good points, but they tend to either get there too soon and keep talking or take too long to get there. This is the first time that really becomes an issue.
Mm-hmm.
The action sequences in this episode, again, are quite good. Carmella's last stand in the throne room as it fills up with the blood of herself and her enemies is great visually and really well executed. The other two, Marana and Striga, deciding to go off and just live happy lesbian vampire lives. Again, they set it up. They set it up okay, and I don't object to it. We're not going to spend a bunch of time with them being tracked down again. We only have 4 more episodes, and we have much more interesting things to deal with.
Yeah.
I'm with you. The final conversation between Hector and Isaac, just a little bit too long. There's a really good point that Isaac reaches when he says, I've been thinking about a lot of stuff lately, and no, I don't want revenge. Revenge is for children, which is kind of true. I'd rather live. Wouldn't you rather live, Hector? And Hector kind of goes, at this point, yeah, I've kind of found someone I want to spend some time with, and I don't quite want to be a tool anymore. And it's a nice. This is kind of the last real bit of time we spend with Isaac, and from the place he started to the place he gets, he has a really nice arc. If we think back to who he was in season 2, this bitter, extremely misanthropic character. He's the one that Dracula told his real plan to. Yeah, I'm going to wipe out humanity, and he said, "You know what? People suck. I'm in." That's where he started. He started with being part and parcel to someone trying to wipe out all of human existence and having the ability to, and going, yeah, I'll help. This seems like a good use of my time and talents. To now having come around to, I'm not just some tool to be wielded. I want to build something. I want to leave something of worth to the world. I want to actually live, not just exist. It's a really nice kind of conclusion to that particular character.
Agreed. All right. So let's go ahead and take a pause for the cause, and let's talk about Grammarly. Normally when I do the Grammarly ad read, I'm always like, oh, what would have made this better? But here's the thing. Like, I don't even know, if this could have been improved upon too much. It was a pretty good season of television. But, hey, nothing is... You can always improve. As they say in the writing craft, everything is draft. Nothing is ever finished. And if you are trying to figure out how to spice up your what you're writing, maybe Grammarly can help you with that. Grammarly's AI-powered products help people communicate more effectively. Grammarly helps you write mistake-free on Gmail, Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, and nearly anywhere else you write on the web. Grammarly corrects hundreds of grammar, punctuation, and spelling mistakes while also catching contextual errors, improving your vocabulary, and suggesting style improvements. To download Grammarly today, go to getgrammarly.com/W2Mnetwork. Again, that's getgrammarly.com/W2Mnetwork to download Grammarly for free. All right. I don't have plot synopsises for episodes 7 through 10, so let's just kind of have a general conversation. Robert, take me through 7 through 10, and let's just kind of kick around a whole bunch of different things.
All right, this is going to be a little bit from my memory, so if I transpose a few different events, I apologize. All right, The Great Work, episode 7. We get the group. We get our refugees arriving at Dracula's castle. Finally, they start setting up camp there. Saint Germain goes in and starts setting up his magic rituals. Sypha and Trevor are taken to the underground court around the same time that Varney and Ratko figure out where it is. This is where we discover that the underground court is in fact just the corpses of the royals, and Zafira is a little bit nuts. To her credit, she knows it, which is one of the funniest. I laughed so hard when Sypha realizes what's going on and tries to talk her out of defending corpses and keeping resources down here. And she says, no, they're just asleep. They're going to wake up. And she goes, you're insane. Like, yeah. I saw Dracula's face come out of the sky, and its impact on the city was the biggest explosion the world's ever seen. Yeah, I went a little nuts. Wouldn't you? So that's what she's up to, Trevor. I don't remember if we do anything with... I don't think we do anything with Hector and Lenore until the final episode. So this one kind of concludes with Varney and Ratko's minions breaking into this underground court. We get some fighting, because of course we do. Trevor finds a sweet new weapon. We get that, and then that's kind of where that one ends. Or that one ends more or less with the arrival of an army outside of Dracula's castle that's going to start causing problems. Which leads us in... Are there anything specifically from that, or do you just want me to keep going through the rest of these?
Keep going.
That leads into death magic, where the army has arrived outside of Dracula's castle and is fighting with Alucard and the ragtag sort of militia he's assembled, it's not going terribly well, but it's not about taking anything. It's about the death, you see. Because all of the death is fueling whatever dark magic Saint-Germain has going on in the castle. Him opening up this portal to hell. We also see that we also get our first kind of look at the Rebus, which is a bunch of corpses all stitched together. This is going to be the vessel for the souls of both Dracula and Lisa to fuse into one, and then create the thing that will allow him to stabilize the infinite corridor. And he's kind of just lost his mind at this point. He's trying to make this work. Alucard realizes what's going on, but he can't interfere at this point. He's too busy trying to fend off the attack on the castle. The other thing we get here, I seem to recall, is again the conclusion of the fight under Targovishta, where Varney has... I think the Great Work has another protracted monologue from Ratko, where again, if you cut it by about half, it's a really good speech, but it goes on too long. So, the conclusion of that battle, they're able to fend off most of the vampires and night creatures. There's some really cool stuff with Sypha using the holy water barrier for her ice to just kind of nuke a bunch of them. So they play around with the tactics a little bit. But Varney was here because there's a very big one of those mirrors in this place somewhere. He finds it, points it at Saint-Germain, and jumps into it. Sypha and Trevor arrive and realize that it's losing its focus, but they want to go where he went, so they jump through it. Which leads to them showing up at the beginning of Endings. At the beginning of the Endings. Where Alucard is kind of getting overwhelmed by the sheer number and power of the night creatures. But because this thing was pointed at Dracula's castle, here come Sypha and Trevor to help save the day. Our trio wreak havoc. The big thing here is the reveal of who Varney is. While Saint-Germain is working his magic, Varney reveals that he is not in fact Varney the Vampire of London. He's not even the alchemist, which is a form he does show, who pointed Saint-Germain in this direction. He is in fact Death, the primeval elemental creature that feeds on, whose life essence is sustained by the death of living things. He has pointed Saint-Germain in this direction because he feels he was robbed. Dracula was poised to unleash death on a scale that had never yet been seen on the earth. And he really does feel like, that would have been great. I would have been able to feast, and if Dracula was able to achieve his goal of wiping out all humanity, I could stop existing so I'd never have to be hungry again, which would just be really nice. Pardon me. And I just have to point out the voice casting for this whole series has been very, very good. I don't think you could. We have a really nice interplay here because Saint-Germain is voiced by the great Bill Nighy, and what starts out as just a little bit of a gag bit of casting is Malcolm freaking McDowell as Varney, which is just a little bit funny. But Malcolm McDowell as Death is just chef's kiss perfect, man. That is some sublime casting. So now this all brings us to the more or less success of Saint-Germain's efforts. He summons the souls of Vlad and Lisa. They are shoved into there's a great line actually. When he says, "Yeah, I wanted Dracula back," and Saint-Germain goes, "But he'll be a Rebus. His soul's going to be fused with his wife. They'll be in this body. He won't be Dracula that you knew." And his response is, "Yeah, you're gonna shove the soul of Dracula with the soul of his wife into one body, with her screaming in agony, trying to figure out what's going on. He'll be insane, and he will kill the world in his insanity."
Yeah, when
I want.
When they actually get around to doing that, and he and he and his wife, and they have like that moment of like body horror where their souls are in that one body and it's like freaking out and everything like that. It's pretty intense.
It is. It is a really great sequence, and that kind of dovetails into it's been a strange ride, where this is successful. He pulls the souls out, sticks them in this body, but Trevor and Cypher and Alucard are all here, and they're able to break through his magic barrier, and Trevor's able to kill the thing before it can really go nuts. There's still a horrific explosion at the end of that. Mm-hmm. It sends Alucard and Cypher away on the other side of a crumbling bridge, while it leaves Trevor kind of stuck on this parapet with death. And we get just an amazing, amazing action sequence as he fights death. Trevor's able to eventually win via all of these magic items that he's kind of been collecting over the season. He assembles them into one thing and is able to strike Death in the head with it, and the resulting explosion sends Death away. I mean, Malcolm McDowell at this point has some great lines. I mean, when Trevor says, "Yeah, I'm going to send you away," his response is, "I was placed here at the beginning of existence to consume the essence of all life. But yeah, sure, you're going to send me away."
And the other thing was like Trevor was saying something to him, and he was like, "Are you writing your own obituary?" Like,
are you reading me your own obituary or something? Like Malcolm McDowell you are never wrong to cast that man. He does such great work. For our kind of denouement with everyone, Lenore and Isaac decides to stick around Striga. He is working on building whatever he's going to build there. Lenore and Hector talk for a bit. Lenore is somewhat lamenting the plight of the vampire and that they desire unnatural stability. But the very essence of nature is to change. She decides she doesn't. She's lived as long as she wants to. She wants to see the sunrise. So she does. She dies. Hector decides he's going to write a book. Alucard decides to allow the people, all the refugees, to stay in this particular location. You get the Belmont Hold right across the road from Dracula's castle, and we can build a decent enough village here. Cypher reveals that she's pregnant with Trevor's child, and initially decides that she's going to go back to her own people, her own caravan. Alucard convinces her to stay, because it's not just going to be him alone in the castle. There's going to be people, there's going to be a community, and wouldn't there just be a great place to raise a child? Right about then, the same horse that... I'm convinced this horse's name is Deus Ex Machina, but I mean that in a good way. That same horse that brought Alucard from the castle to Dynasty shows up, and it's bearing Trevor. At the last minute before the explosion that took care of Death, would have killed him, Saint-Germain, with the last vestiges of his life, was able to open a portal to the Infinite Corridor, and Trevor woke up, where did he say, like on the banks of the Danube, so, a ways away. It was a bit of a trek to get back. I think they said it was a couple of weeks.
I love when they get back together, and after a moment of talking, she's like, "Someone come and kill this man." She just drops him.
I forget what it is. There's a bit of a one-liner, and she's like, "Oh, someone come and kill this man."
And he's just on his face. He's like, "It won't take long.
It won't be that hard."
The show has a sense of humor about itself, which is important.
It really does. And our final little epilogue is that somehow Vlad and Lisa arrived back in the world in their bodies. But Vlad's kind of back to being sane and normal, so he and Lisa are going to live a more normal life, and at some point in the indeterminate future they'll reveal to their son that they're still alive, but they feel he deserves a bit of closure about that and to live his own life. That's kind of how things wrap up. So, again, we kicked around the last 4 episodes there a little bit, but what stands out to you over that over our closing arc there? What do you want to talk about, good, bad, or otherwise?
Okay, so just to kind of keep this brief, because I don't have a whole lot to say, but I will say that the visuals in the back half of the show are really, really great. And as much as I'm kind of over the elongated anime fight sequence that everyone loves so much, I thought here at least, because the camera work was so fun and interesting and not something I see in a lot of other animated properties, I was stylistically, aesthetically, I was into it. And I didn't mind that these went on forever. That final interaction between Sypha, Trevor, and Alucard was great. I thought they wrapped. I really don't have any complaints about how they wrapped up the series. They defeated the bad guy. My only minor complaint is there's a conversation that takes place between Racco and Varney that just goes on forever, and it seems like it's like two kids arguing. I've tolerated you for this long because I needed you. Well, I've tolerated you for this long because I needed. Oh my god.
And there's a good point in there that Ratko gives about the nature of war.
Mm-hmm.
War is not just armies moving in formation and fighting on the field. War is poisoning wells. War is
killing children.
Again, that's especially if you look at this point in time in human and military history. Yeah, it happened a lot.
Yeah, sure.
War is the worst. War is the worst thing that anyone can do to each other, basically, especially on a large scale. And his take is, and I'm very, very good at it. And just because you have a misguided notion about just how brutal war is, that's on you, not on me.
Hector's finale there. I was going to say, Lenore kind of walking off, and Lenore having the tables turned on her, and she has no power. Now she's kind of Hector's pet, and she's like, I'm a vampire. I'm not going to live a domesticated life. We're never going to have children. We're not going to have a family. All right, I guess there's nothing else left to do but die. And she was like, and so she walks off and she does it. And I'm like, okay, I kind of buy that as an ending for her. Like,
yeah.
What else was she going to do? She's already been a vampire, living the vampire life. She was at the seat of power at one point. That's all gone now, and all that's left is, well, I could have a relationship with Hector, but what kind of relationship are you supposed to have with this character? So she's like, no, I'm done. And in being done, she just walks into the sunset, literally.
She walks into the sunlight to live deliberately.
Yeah, which I liked. I liked her ending. I'll just get my final thoughts on the show. Overall, this has been a mixed bag. We started doing this because everybody in the chat was like, "Oh my god, Castlevania," and then every single one of those people dropped off, and we were the last man standing.
kind of a recurring theme with you.
Yeah, that's why I don't push a lot of things anymore. It's out there. We'll see what happens. But I'm not unhappy. I think season 3 was such a chore that and season 4 was so good that I'm left with I'm glad we did it. It wasn't the worst thing I've ever watched. It wasn't a complete waste of time. It wasn't like it was a 13-hour epic or anything. These were 20-minute episodes. Not all of them were even 10 full episodes. So overall, the Castlevania experience has been fine. I didn't like it as much as She-Ra or Voltron, but those were more my speed than this one was. This one was, I'm watching it because other people told me I should, and it's not bad, but it wasn't my favorite thing, and I'll give you the last word.
Season 3 was just such a drag, man. Again, Season 1 is not really a season. It's kind of a teaser. It's a proof of concept. But Season 2 is really good, and Season 4 is really good. So, ultimately, I think it's a net positive. This show gives us some genuinely great action sequences throughout its entire existence. It's the best thing about it, more or less. We have good character interactions. It's just kind of the overall pacing and some decision making as it relates to that drags the thing down.
Mm-hmm.
But for the most part, I enjoyed it. I would be After seeing this, I would be kind of curious to see what this creative team could do with some other properties that are in kind of the similar dark fantasy vein. Maybe it's because Kentaro Miura, we got news of Kentaro Miura's passing not too long ago. But I would be curious to see what these guys could do with Berserk, which is, if you don't know what Berserk is, it's difficult to fully explain what a monolith it is of not just the manga industry, but has extended to a giant amount of fiction. It started publication in 1988 and was still going again when Miura passed earlier this month. It's like the preeminent dark fantasy epic. If you've ever seen a sad anime boy wielding a really big sword, they were inspired by Berserk, because that's what Guts does. It's the key to Berserk, though, is it's not just the violence. There's plenty of violence. It's really about the human interactions and how the interactions between people drive what goes on. And it is a genuine masterpiece, and I hope they're able to finish it even after the author's passing. But I would be curious to see what they could do with it. Berserk's never had a really good adaptation. There was an anime series I want to say the 90s, that gets some of it very, very right. The problem was the limited production budget led to the action sequences being not very good. There's a trio of movies on Netflix actually that I rather enjoy, but they're mostly done with 3D modeling animation, and it's a little bit janky and it's a little bit rushed given the amount of material they cover. And the less said about the 2016-2017 all CGI production of anime production, the better. That's a mess. So I might be curious to see what this team could do with that, because they seem to have a knack for kind of blending violence with genuine human interaction, which is the driving catalyst behind everything, and creating memorable action sequences. So I'm certainly curious to see what this team does next, regardless of what the property is. This was an up and down ride, but ultimately ends on a very high note. So kudos is kind of the best way I can say that.
All right, and that wraps up our review of Castlevania. Hey, before we go, I just want to remind everybody, we have a link in our description here for AmazonMusic.com, and you have to, as I've been told to remind people, if you click the link to get your free 30 days, you actually have to click on the link and fill out the whole form or whatever in order to get the free 30 days. When you do that, that helps us out, keeps the gears moving here at the Radulich and Broadcasting Network on W2M. So if you're going to take our advice and check out AmazonMusic.com, that's GetAmazonMusic.com/W2M Network.
And you should.
Follow the link through the page, fill out the information on the page, and then after 30 days or at the 30-day mark, if you don't like it, you can cancel it, no fuss, no muss. But it really is a good service. We have, no joking around today, we have found a lot of really fun music to play on various podcasts through Amazon Music. Almost anything that you can find through any other streamer. It's better than Apple Music, I can tell you that right now. I've used Apple Music. Apple Music sucks. But but anything that I have found on Spotify, I can find on Apple Music. So people who use it say, honestly, it's as good, if not better, than Spotify. And there's no, anything that you look for on Spotify, you'll find there. So you're really not losing anything. Their radio choices are fun. It's a good all around product. So if you want to take advantage of the free trial of Amazon Music Unlimited, go to getamazonmusic.com/W2M Network. Remember, Amazon Music is free. Amazon Music Unlimited is not. So there might be some things where this allows me to stream. That's not what we're talking about here. You're signing up for Amazon Music Unlimited. All right, with that out of the way now, Tonight, Robert Winfree is pushing me in the pool. Do you want a special intro like I gave Jesse last night, where I played me getting hit in the head with a chair, and then Jesse came out and was like, "I'm taking over." You want a similar intro tonight on Metal Hammer of Doom?
That doesn't strike me as entirely necessary.
That's okay. I was doing that because it was Jesse's show that he was coming back to, so had to do the old chair shot entry. But Robert Winfree is coming on the Metal Hammer of Doom. He pitched the show. He gets to talk about it. He gets to host it. Basically, I'm just going to play music. It's Galactic Kraken. The guy's name is Joshua Young. Jonathan Young. Jonathan Young does a whole bunch of like Disney metal covers, and which
are really great.
Yeah, I started listening to him the other day. His music from this fake band that he created, Galactic Kraken, is very, Through the Fire and Flames, that band.
Dragon Force?
Dragon Force. Very Dragon Force-y, so I can see what you like.
We're going to talk about it. Some of it's a little bit Dragon Force, some of it's Sabaton. There's a little bit of Hailstorm thrown in there.
Mm-hmm. So I can see why you like...
And it's all kind of drenched in this like 90s neon arcade aesthetic.
Mm-hmm. So I can see why you like it so much, and it definitely fits into what we talk about on the Metal Hammer of Doom, so it's a good suggestion. So that'll be tonight. Tomorrow, Ronnie Adams...
Look, I will never pitch you Duran Duran or something like that for the Metal Hammer of Doom. I'm not that guy.
You don't have to pitch it up, because I'm already going to do it.
I know, because you're weird. Hey, Duran Duran on the Metal Hammer of Doom. Yeah, those two things do not go together.
Metal Hammer of Doom is not a reflection of what we talk about. Last night, Jesse came back. As I said, we reviewed Invincible Volume 2, 8 is Enough. Christine and I reviewed Man of Steel by Brian Michael Bendis. Tomorrow night, we're doing another TV party for Invincible. And then on Thursday, Pat and I are going to do the
record. If anything comes up about it on the Invincible thing, if you're feeling like crap or if Ronnie bows out, I've seen it, I can talk about it.
Thank you. Pat and I are starting up another History of Boxing podcast. This one is the Four Kings of Boxing. Tommy the Hitman Hearns, Marvelous Marvin Hagler, Sugar Ray Leonard, and Roberto I Punched a Horse Duran. So we're starting off with Roberto Duran this Thursday. Friday is our re-airing of Maleficent. And then Jeff Sloboda allegedly is coming back on the show. We're going to review Without Remorse. Saturday is another syndicated source material, What If Spider-Man Had Kept the Cosmic Powers. And then on Sunday, you're getting your first taste of an archive from Robert Winfree. Everyone Loves a Bad Guy, Disney Villains, Part 1. And that all leads into talking about Cruella next week. So we've got Disney Great Parodies, Volume 1, A Damn Good Hollywood for Cruella, and an on trial for 101 Dalmatians. That's all going to be fun. You can check out what we did last...
You put the live version on trial?
No. What?
Which version of 101 Dalmatians are you doing the on trial for?
The one with Glenn Close.
So the live action one?
Yeah.
Okay. That was my question.
Okay.
You talking the animated one or the live action?
I'm like, is he asking about like a Broadway version? What the fuck's he talking about? No, I missed the live. I missed when you said live action. Last week, we re-aired our Luke Cage Season 1 review, Jupiter's Legacy Volume 1, Spiral, Saliva Every 20 Years, Unspoken Issues, number 31, X-Men, number 11, Jupiter's Legacy Season 1, Impact Under Siege, WrestleMania Backlash, the Zombies Trilogy, MODOK Assassin, Army of the Dead, and Batman v Superman, plus A Long Road to Ruin, Missing in Action with Pat Mullen. All right, I'm done. That's all my plugs. Robert, go ahead and tell them what you're doing this weekend.
Well, let me just reiterate that we've got some re-airs of the old show that I used to host called Everyone Loves a Bad Guy. Disney Villains Part 1 this coming Sunday. To start Cruella week, the irony being that we did not actually talk about Cruella de Vil on that particular podcast. Disney Villains Part 2 to close that particular week. Again, so the Sunday after that, and the Pixar episode I think is scheduled for the one after that.
It is scheduled for June 20th.
Yeah, it's been kind of a fun experience to re-listen to some of those shows. I'm truncating the silences. I am, which shaves about if you if you shave every silence that's over a second long or so out over the course of a 2-hour podcast, give or take, you shave about 15 minutes off. I had to do some more serious editing on the part 2 of the Disney villains because if you'll recall, I was really late trying to get stuff to work on my end at the start of that podcast. So the first 10 minutes or so is kind of between the intro song running entirely too long, you're vamping, and then that's just kind of decompressing what happened. I had to cut the first 10 minutes before we actually get around to what's relevant. But it's kind of been a fun thing to go back and re-listen to. I record new intros for them that are just kind of my introduction to the show, my thoughts on the individual episode, and, of course, reading some ad copy. So those will start, and I mentioned this. I'll give you guys a little preview. I had a lot of fun doing that show. It was, I did it until I kind of had to stop for a bit. I'm not listening back to it. I'm not terribly opposed to the idea of bringing it back as maybe a once a month thing if these hit really well for us. That might be something I consider doing. There was some good discussions that came out of it, and there's some stuff that might be worth either revisiting or, again, looking forward to some other material. So we'll see how that goes. What else happens in the world and in our lives that may or may not impact that. You can find me in other places. I host the 411 Ground and Pound MMA podcast. This last week we reviewed UFC on ESPN Plus 46 and erroneously previewed UFC on ESPN Plus 47. We're getting I didn't double check this, we are getting one of the rare Saturdays off this coming Saturday. Don't know what I'll do with myself. But I'll be back to preview it again in a week. I'm going to assume something's going to happen to that particular card, or...
Hey, you're off this Saturday? Because Devin Haney is fighting Jorge Linares on DAZN, and on Showtime, Nordine Ubali versus Nonito Donaire is happening. So, pick one.
Look, Mark... I finally have a Saturday.
Oh, my God.
And every waking free hour I have does not have to be filled with podcasting,
Fine, whatever.
Let me double check. Mostly let me double check and make sure I don't have something else going on that evening.
Mm-hmm.
Of those two, I'm more interested in Haney and Linares.
That would be the one I would pick.
Devin Haney being one of the preeminent kind of guys, especially at the lighter weight classes, forming a bit of a 4-ish, not a full-on Four Kings revival, but a bit of that. You get a bit of that vibe with him, Bud Crawford, Errol Spence, and who's the fourth? Teofimo Lopez Jr.
Mm-hmm.
Don't know why I spaced on him. And if you're of the forward-thinking variety, there are some people who think Shakur Stevenson's doesn't suck. And if you're of the really forward-looking variety, you've got Mikey Garcia hanging around. So Haney's kind of the forgotten man in that bit of the equation, but of those two offered fights, I tend to think that Haney and Linares is the more interesting one.
Mm-hmm.
So, potentially be on the lookout for that. Let me see, what was the other thing? You can find my full report for UFC on ESPN Plus 46 in the MMA Zone of 411 Mania. What else? You can find me covering professional wrestling on occasion. I cover AEW's Dark Elevation on Mondays, whatever MLW is doing on Wednesdays, and WWE SmackDown on Fridays. So be on the lookout for those if you're so interested. And yeah, I'll be back later this evening to talk. Jesse joining us for this episode?
Yes.
Okay, so I'll be back tonight to talk with Mark and Jesse about Galactic Kraken and the Starship Velociraptor.
All right, folks, for Robert Winfree, I'm Mark Radulich. This has been our review of Castlevania Season 4. Be well, be safe, and behave.